The shuttle landed on Earth with a soft thud, and Ambassador Vrixthal felt her 4 hearts beating faster than normal. She was a Korthan, tall and thin with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that could see in almost complete darkness. She had served the Galactic Federation for over 200 cycles, and she had never been to Earth before. None of the 12 ambassadors on this shuttle had ever visited the human homeworld. "I do not understand why we must stay here for 30 of their days," said Ambassador Zenok, a massive Brullian with thick gray scales and a voice like grinding stones. "We could complete the trade negotiations in 3 days at most." "The humans requested it," said Ambassador Melira, a small Fayari with delicate wings that folded against her back. "They said we needed to understand their culture before we could truly work together." Vrixthal looked out the window at the city called New Chicago. It was different from what she expected. There were trees everywhere, and the buildings were not as tall as she had imagined. Humans walked on the streets below, and some of them looked up at the shuttle with curious expressions on their faces. "They seem so ordinary," said Ambassador Krull, a Thoraxian who looked like a giant insect with a hard shell. "I have read many reports about humans, but seeing them in person, they appear quite unremarkable." The shuttle door opened, and a human woman walked in. She was small compared to most of the ambassadors, with brown skin and black hair tied back. She wore simple clothes and had a warm smile on her face. "Welcome to Earth," she said. "My name is Captain Sarah Chen, and I will be your guide and host during your stay. I hope you are all ready for an interesting experience." Vrixthal noticed something strange about the human's voice. It was not cold or formal like the voices of most Federation officials. There was warmth in it, as if Captain Chen was genuinely happy to see them. "Thank you for your welcome," said Ambassador Zenok, speaking for the group. "We are here to complete the trade negotiations as quickly as possible." Captain Chen laughed softly. "Yes, I know, but first you will learn about us. The Federation Council has agreed to our request. For the next 30 days you will live among us, eat with us, and experience our daily lives. Only then will we discuss trade." The ambassadors looked at each other with confusion. This was not how things were done in the Federation. Trade negotiations were formal affairs with strict protocols and schedules. Living among the local population was considered unnecessary and potentially dangerous. "This is most unusual," said Ambassador Melira. "Is this truly necessary?" "It is necessary for us," said Captain Chen. "You see, humans do not do business with strangers. We need to know who we are working with. We need to trust you and you need to trust us. That takes time." Vrixthal found this idea strange but also interesting. In the Federation, trust was built through contracts and legal agreements, not through personal relationships. But the humans seemed to operate differently. Captain Chen led them out of the shuttle and into a large building nearby. Inside, there were 12 separate rooms, each one designed for a different species. Vrixthal was impressed by the attention to detail. Her room had low lighting that was comfortable for her eyes, and the temperature was exactly what she preferred. "Each room has been prepared according to your species' needs," said Captain Chen. "If anything is not right, please tell me immediately. Your comfort is important to us." "Why?" asked Ambassador Krull. "We are here for business, not comfort." Captain Chen looked at the Thoraxian with a curious expression. "Because you are our guests," she said simply, "and we take care of our guests." Over the next few days, the ambassadors settled into their new temporary homes. Captain Chen visited each of them regularly, asking if they needed anything and making sure they were comfortable. She brought them food from their home planets, arranged communication with their families, and answered all their questions about human culture. Vrixthal began to notice something strange happening to her. She started to look forward to Captain Chen's visits. The human woman would sit with her and talk about small things, like the weather or the local animals or the history of the city. At first, Vrixthal found these conversations pointless, but slowly she began to enjoy them. "I do not understand humans," she told Captain Chen one evening. "You spend so much time on things that do not matter. You talk about the weather, but you cannot change it. You talk about animals, but they are not useful to us. Why do you waste your time?" Captain Chen smiled. "These things matter to us because they are part of our lives. The weather affects our moods. Animals bring us joy. And talking about small things helps us connect with each other." "Connect?" Vrixthal asked. "What do you mean by connect?" "It means building a relationship," said Captain Chen. "When we share small things, we learn to trust each other with big things. Every conversation, no matter how small, is a step toward understanding." Vrixthal thought about this for a long time after Captain Chen left. In the Federation, relationships were transactional. You gave something and you received something in return. But humans seemed to build relationships just for the sake of having them. It was a strange concept, but not an unpleasant one. On the 5th day, Captain Chen announced that the ambassadors would begin their cultural immersion program. They would be assigned to human families and workplaces, where they would spend their days learning about human life. "This is highly irregular," said Ambassador Zenok. "We are diplomats, not students." "You are both," said Captain Chen. "And the best diplomats are those who understand the people they work with. Trust me, Ambassador. You may be surprised by what you learn." Vrixthal was assigned to a family called the Rodriguezes. They lived in a small house on the edge of the city, with a garden full of colorful plants and a small animal called a dog. The family consisted of a mother named Maria, a father named Carlos, and 2 children named Sofia and Diego. When Vrixthal arrived at their home, the whole family was waiting outside. The children ran toward her with excited faces, and the dog barked loudly. Vrixthal felt a moment of fear, but then Sofia, the younger child, grabbed her hand and smiled. "You're so tall," said Sofia, "and your skin is so pretty it looks like the sky." Vrixthal did not know how to respond. No one had ever called her pretty before. In the Federation, physical appearance was considered irrelevant to one's value, but the child's words made her feel something warm inside her chest. "Thank you," she said carefully. "Your home is very nice." Maria stepped forward and hugged Vrixthal. The ambassador stiffened in surprise. Physical contact between strangers was not common in her culture, but Maria's embrace was gentle and warm, and after a moment, Vrixthal found herself relaxing. "Welcome to our home," said Maria. "You are family now." Family? It was a word that meant something very different to humans than it did to Korthans. For Vrixthal's people, family was a biological unit that existed for reproduction and genetic preservation. But for humans, family seemed to be something more. It was a bond of choice, of love, of belonging. As Vrixthal sat down to her first meal with the Rodriguez family, she felt the beginning of something she could not name. It was small and quiet, like a seed just starting to grow. She did not know it yet, but her transformation had begun. The other ambassadors were having similar experiences. Ambassador Zenok was assigned to a construction site where he worked alongside human builders. Ambassador Melira joined a school where she spent time with human children. Ambassador Krull was placed in a hospital where he observed human doctors and nurses caring for their patients. Each of them began to notice the same strange thing. Humans touched each other constantly. They hugged, they patted backs, they held hands. They said kind words for no reason. They laughed together and cried together. They shared food even when they did not need to. They remembered small details about each other's lives. It was confusing, it was inefficient, and yet somehow it felt right. By the end of the first week, the 12 ambassadors gathered together for a private meeting. They all looked different somehow. Their postures were more relaxed. Their voices were softer, and when they looked at each other, there was a new warmth in their eyes. "Something is happening to us," said Ambassador Zenok. "I do not know what it is, but I feel different." "I feel it too," said Ambassador Melira. When I am with the children at the school, I feel happy. Not useful, not productive, just happy. I have never felt this way before. Vrixthel nodded. The humans have a word for it. They call it belonging. It is when you are part of something bigger than yourself and that something cares for you. The ambassadors sat in silence, thinking about this new feeling. They had come to Earth as representatives of the Federation, ready to complete a trade negotiation and leave. But now, they were beginning to understand that humans had something the Federation did not. Something precious. Something worth learning about. And they had 23 more days to discover what it was. The second week on Earth brought new challenges for the ambassadors. Captain Chen announced that they would be participating in something called a community project. All 12 of them would work together with humans to build a new park in a neighborhood that needed one. I do not understand, said Ambassador Kroll. Why would we build a park? We are diplomats, not construction workers. Captain Chen smiled patiently. Because the community needs it, and because working together will teach you more about humans than any lecture or document ever could. The ambassadors arrived at the construction site on a bright morning. There were already about 50 humans there, wearing work clothes and carrying tools. They greeted the ambassadors with waves and smiles, as if they had known them for years. Vrixthel found herself working next to a young human man named James. He was tall and strong, with kind eyes and a quick laugh. He showed her how to plant trees and explained why each tree was important. This one is an oak, he said, pointing to a small sapling. It will take many years to grow, but one day it will be huge. Children who are not even born yet will climb it and play under it. That is why we plant trees, not for ourselves but for the future. Vrixthel thought about this. In the Federation, most decisions were made based on immediate benefit. Long-term planning existed, but it was calculated in terms of resources and efficiency, not in terms of children playing under trees. You plant trees for people you will never meet, she asked. Yes, said James. That is what community means. We take care of each other, even people we do not know, even people who have not been born yet. We are all connected. As the days passed, Vrixthel began to understand what James meant. The humans at the construction site worked hard, but they also talked and laughed and shared food. When someone made a mistake, the others helped them fix it without judgment. When someone was tired, others took over their work. It was a constant flow of giving and receiving, of helping and being helped. Ambassador Zenok, who had been resistant to the entire experience, began to change the most. His tough exterior started to soften. One day, Vrixthel saw him carrying water bottles to the human workers, making sure everyone had enough to drink. They are not as weak as I thought, Zenok admitted to Vrixthel during a break. They work hard and they do not complain, and they seem to genuinely care about each other. I have never seen anything like it in the Federation. Neither have I, said Vrixthel. Our species are efficient and logical, but we are not connected like this. We do not belong to each other. Perhaps we should, said Zenok quietly. Perhaps we have been missing something important. That evening, Captain Chen gathered the ambassadors for a special event. A human family was celebrating a birthday, and the ambassadors were invited to join. The birthday was for a little girl named Lily, who was turning 7 years old. Her family had decorated their home with colorful balloons and ribbons. There was a large cake with candles, and many people had come to celebrate. Vrixthel watched as Lily opened her gifts. Each gift was carefully wrapped, and Lily's face lit up with joy as she saw what was inside. But what struck Vrixthel most was not the gifts themselves. It was the way everyone watched Lily with love in their eyes. It was the way they clapped and cheered for her. It was the way they made her feel like the most important person in the world. This is what humans call love, Captain Chen said softly, standing next to Vrixthel. It is the foundation of everything we do. Love, Vrixthel repeated. We have a similar word in my language, but it does not mean the same thing. For us, it is a chemical reaction that helps with reproduction, but for you it seems to be much more. It is everything, said Captain Chen. It is why we build parks for children we will never meet. It is why we celebrate birthdays and remember anniversaries. It is why we take care of the old and the sick. Love is not just a feeling. It is a choice we make every day. Vrixthel felt something stirring inside her. It was the same feeling she had experienced at the Rodriguez home, but stronger now. She looked around at the happy faces, at the colorful decorations, at the little girl surrounded by people who adored her. And she understood, for the first time, what she had been missing her entire life. She had never been loved like this. In the Federation, she was valued for her skills and her service. She was respected for her achievements and her position, but no one had ever celebrated her existence simply because she existed. No one had ever looked at her with the kind of love that filled this room. Tears began to form in her large, dark eyes. She tried to stop them, but they came anyway, falling down her blue cheeks like small rivers. Captain Chen noticed and gently took her hand. "It is okay to cry," she said. "Tears are how we release emotions that are too big to hold inside." "I do not understand what is happening to me," Vrixthel whispered. "I feel like I am breaking apart, but also like I am being put back together." "That is called transformation," said Captain Chen. "It happens when we open ourselves to new ways of being. It can be painful, but it is also beautiful." The other ambassadors were experiencing similar moments. Ambassador Melira was sitting with a group of children who had made her a flower crown. Ambassador Krull was helping an elderly human cut his cake. Ambassador Zenok was holding a human baby, looking at the tiny creature with something like wonder on his face. By the end of the party, all 12 ambassadors were changed. They had laughed and cried and celebrated with their human hosts. They had experienced the power of community, of belonging, of love, and they knew that they could never go back to the way they were before. That night, Vrixthel returned to the Rodriguez home. Sophia was waiting for her at the door, wearing pajamas decorated with little stars. "Did you have fun at the party?" Sophia asked. "Yes," said Vrixthel. "It was the most wonderful experience of my life." Sophia smiled and reached up her arms. Vrixthel understood the gesture now. She bent down and picked up the little girl, holding her close. "I love you, Vrixthel," said Sophia, using the ambassador's name carefully. Vrixthel felt her heart's ache with a strange, beautiful pain. "I love you too, Sophia," she said, and she meant it. This was pack bonding. This was what humans did. They reached out and connected with others, forming bonds that transcended species and culture and logic. They made each other family, not by blood but by choice. And Vrixthel was beginning to understand that this was the most powerful force in the universe. The third week brought a crisis that would test everything the ambassadors had learned. A massive storm hit the region, causing floods and destruction across several cities. Thousands of humans were displaced from their homes, and the local authorities called for all available help. Captain Chen gathered the ambassadors and explained the situation. "This is not part of your planned program," she said, "but I am asking you to help, not as diplomats but as friends." Ambassador Zenok stepped forward immediately. "Tell us what to do," he said. "We are ready." The ambassadors were divided into teams and sent to different areas. Vrixthel was assigned to an emergency shelter, where displaced families were being housed. She worked alongside human volunteers, handing out food and blankets, helping people find their loved ones, and comforting those who had lost everything. It was exhausting work. Vrixthel had never done anything like it before. In the Federation, emergency response was handled by specialized units, not by ordinary citizens. But here, everyone helped. Teachers, doctors, construction workers, children, elderly people. Everyone gave what they could. One moment changed everything for Vrixthel. She was walking through the shelter when she saw a young mother sitting alone, crying. Her two small children were sleeping on cots nearby. The woman looked exhausted and hopeless. Vrixthal sat down next to her. "Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked. The woman looked up at her with red eyes. "My home is gone," she said. "Everything I had is under the water. I do not know what to do." Vrixthal did not know what to say. She had no solutions to offer, no resources to give. But she remembered what she had learned from the humans. Sometimes what people needed was not solutions. They needed presence. They needed connection. She reached out and took the woman's hand. "I am here with you," she said. "You are not alone." The woman looked at their joined hands, the blue alien skin against her brown human skin, and she smiled through her tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for being here." They sat together for a long time, not speaking, just being present with each other. And Vrixthal felt something powerful flowing between them. It was not words or actions. It was simply the feeling of being together in a difficult moment. This was pack bonding at its purest. This was what humans did. They did not run from pain. They walked toward it and stood with each other in the darkness. Across the city, the other ambassadors were having similar experiences. Ambassador Zenok was using his massive strength to clear debris and rescue trapped victims. Ambassador Melira was flying over flooded areas, spotting people who needed help. Ambassador Krull was working in a medical tent, using his precise movements to assist human doctors. But more than their physical contributions, it was their emotional transformation that was most remarkable. They were no longer observers of human culture. They were participants. They were part of the community. When the storm finally passed, the ambassadors gathered at the main shelter. They were dirty and exhausted, but their eyes were bright with something new, something that had not been there before. "I have never felt this way," said Ambassador Melira. "In my whole life, I have never felt so useful and so connected at the same time." "This is what humans call purpose," said Captain Chen, who had been working alongside them the entire time. "It comes from serving something bigger than yourself." "But we serve the Federation," said Ambassador Krull. "We have always served something bigger than ourselves." "That is different," said Captain Chen. "Serving an institution is not the same as serving people. When you look into someone's eyes and help them directly, heart to heart, that is when you find true purpose." The ambassadors thought about this. In the Federation, service was abstract. You served the council, the protocols, the system. But here, service was personal. You served the woman who lost her home. You served the children who were scared. You served the community that needed you. That evening, the Rodriguez family welcomed Vrixthal home with a warm meal and many hugs. They had been worried about her during the storm, and they were relieved to see her safe. "You are a hero," said Diego, the older child. "You helped so many people." "I just did what everyone else was doing," said Vrixthal. "I helped because it was the right thing to do." Maria smiled and touched Vrixthal's face gently. "That is exactly what makes you a hero," she said. "You saw a need and you filled it. You saw pain and you eased it. That is the human way." "But I am not human," said Vrixthal. "No," said Carlos, "but you have a human heart now. It does not matter what species you are. What matters is how you treat others. And you, Vrixthal, have shown us that kindness has no boundaries." Vrixthal felt tears coming again. She had cried more in these 3 weeks than in her entire life before, but she was no longer ashamed of her tears. She understood now that they were not a sign of weakness. They were a sign of connection, of feeling, of being alive. The next day, the 12 ambassadors met to discuss their experiences. Something fundamental had changed in all of them. Their conversations were no longer formal and distant. They laughed together. They touched each other's shoulders. They shared stories about the people they had met and helped. "We came here to negotiate a trade agreement," said Ambassador Zenok. "But I think we have received something far more valuable than any trade could provide." "We have learned how to be part of something," said Ambassador Melira. Not just observers but participants, not just visitors but family. "The question now," said Ambassador Krull, "is what we do with this knowledge. Do we return to the Federation and forget everything we have learned, or do we bring this back with us?" Vrixthel stood up. "We cannot forget," she said firmly. "We cannot go back to the way we were. We have been changed, transformed, and I believe we have a responsibility to share this transformation with others." The ambassadors nodded in agreement. They had come to Earth expecting to learn about human trade practices and economic systems. Instead, they had learned about love, community, and belonging. They had experienced pack bonding, and it had changed them forever. Captain Chen entered the room with news. "The storm has passed and the recovery is going well," she said. "The community wants to thank you. There will be a ceremony tomorrow." "A ceremony?" asked Ambassador Zenok. "For what?" "For your service," said Captain Chen. "For being there when we needed you, for becoming part of us." The ambassadors looked at each other with surprise and gratitude. They had not helped because they wanted recognition. They had helped because it felt right. But the fact that the humans wanted to honor them made the experience even more meaningful. That night, Vrixthel lay awake in her bed, thinking about everything that had happened. She had been on Earth for only 3 weeks, but it felt like a lifetime. She had learned more about herself and about the universe than in all her 200 cycles of existence. She thought about the woman in the shelter holding her hand. She thought about Sophia calling her pretty. She thought about Maria's hugs and Carlos's wisdom. She thought about the children at the school, the workers at the construction site, the little girl at the birthday party. All of these moments had woven together to create something beautiful, a tapestry of connection, a web of belonging, a family that stretched beyond blood and species. This was what humans had that the Federation lacked. This was their secret power. They did not conquer the galaxy with weapons or technology. They conquered it with love. And now, the ambassadors were carriers of that love. They would take it back to their home planets and spread it throughout the Federation. They would teach others about pack bonding, about community, about the transformative power of human connection. The galaxy would never be the same. The 4th week on Earth was different from the others. The ambassadors were no longer students of human culture. They had become participants, contributors, and in many ways, teachers themselves. The ceremony to honor their service during the storm was held in a large outdoor space in the center of New Chicago. Thousands of people attended, and the 12 ambassadors stood on a stage, looking out at the sea of human faces. Vrixthel felt nervous but also proud. She looked at her fellow ambassadors and saw the same mixture of emotions on their faces. They had come so far from the cold, distant diplomats who had arrived just 3 weeks ago. The mayor of New Chicago gave a speech, thanking the ambassadors for their help during the crisis. But the most powerful moment came when ordinary citizens stepped up to share their stories. A young man told how Ambassador Zenok had pulled him from the rubble of his collapsed home. An elderly woman described how Ambassador Melira had spotted her waving from her rooftop and called for help. A father talked about how Ambassador Krull had helped save his daughter's life in the medical tent. And then the woman from the shelter approached the microphone. She looked at Vrixthel with tears in her eyes. "I was at my lowest moment," she said. "I had lost everything. I was alone and scared. And then this beautiful blue woman sat down next to me and took my hand. She did not try to fix my problems. She just stayed with me. She reminded me that I was not alone." The woman paused, composing herself. "In that moment, I learned something important. Kindness is the same in any language, on any planet, in any species. This ambassador from a world I cannot even pronounce showed me more compassion than I have ever known, and for that I will be grateful forever." Vrixthel felt her heart swelling with emotion. She had not expected to make such an impact. She had just done what felt right. but she was beginning to understand that small acts of kindness could have ripple effects that spread far beyond what anyone could imagine. After the ceremony, the ambassadors were surrounded by people who wanted to thank them, hug them, and take pictures with them. It was overwhelming but also wonderful. They felt like celebrities, but more importantly, they felt like family. That evening, Captain Chen gathered the ambassadors for a private conversation. Her face was serious, but her eyes were kind. "The 30 days are almost over," she said. "In 1 week, you will return to your home planets, but before you go, I need to tell you something important." The ambassadors listened carefully. "This program was not just about cultural exchange," Captain Chen continued. "It was an experiment. For years, humanity has struggled to connect with the other species of the Federation. We found that trade agreements and diplomatic protocols were not enough. We needed something deeper." "You used us as test subjects?" asked Ambassador Krull, a hint of his old defensiveness in his voice. "Yes," said Captain Chen honestly, "but we also gave you something real. Everything you experienced was genuine. The families, the communities, the storm, the service. None of it was staged. We simply created the conditions for connection and trusted that it would happen naturally." Vrixthal considered this. Part of her felt manipulated, but another part understood. The humans had recognized something that the Federation had missed. They had found a way to bridge the gap between species that no treaty or agreement could achieve. "What do you want from us now?" asked Ambassador Zenok. "We want you to share what you have learned," said Captain Chen. "We want you to bring pack bonding back to the Federation. We want you to transform your own communities the way we have transformed you." "That is a big request," said Ambassador Melira. "Our species have their own cultures and traditions. They may not be open to this kind of change." "We know," said Captain Chen. "But we also know that you are not the same people who arrived here 3 weeks ago. You have been transformed, and transformed people have the power to transform others." The ambassadors looked at each other. They all knew that Captain Chen was right. They had experienced something profound, something that could not be undone, and they had a responsibility to share it with their people. "We will try," said Vrixthal. "We cannot promise success, but we will try." Captain Chen smiled. "That is all we ask." The remaining days on Earth were bittersweet. The ambassadors knew they were running out of time, and they tried to make every moment count. Vrixthal spent as much time as possible with the Rodriguez family. She helped Sophia with her homework, played games with Diego, cooked meals with Maria, and had long conversations with Carlos about life and the universe. "I do not want to leave," she admitted one evening. "This place has become my home." Carlos put his arm around her shoulders. "Home is not a place," he said. "Home is the people you love, and you will always have a home with us, no matter where you are in the galaxy." "But I will miss you so much," said Vrixthal. "And we will miss you," said Maria. "But that is what makes love so powerful. It stretches across any distance. It lasts through any time. You will carry us in your hearts, and we will carry you in ours." The final trade negotiation was almost an afterthought. The ambassadors met with human officials and quickly agreed on terms that were fair and beneficial to all parties. But the real work had already been done. The relationships that had been built during the past month were worth more than any trade agreement. On the last night before their departure, the humans threw a farewell party for the ambassadors. It was a celebration of everything they had shared together. There was music and dancing and food from many different cultures. There were speeches and laughter and tears. Vrixthal danced with Sophia, twirling the little girl around while she giggled with joy. She hugged Maria and Carlos so tightly that she was afraid she might hurt them. She told Diego that he would grow up to be a wonderful person and that she would always remember him. "Promise you will come back," said Sophia, her eyes shining with tears. "I promise," said Vrixthal. "No matter what happens, I will come back to see you." The other ambassadors were making similar promises to their human families. They exchanged contact information and vowed to stay in touch. They knew that the physical distance would be great, but the emotional connection would remain strong. As the night came to an end, Captain Chen stood before the ambassadors one final time. "You came here as strangers," she said. "You leave as family. Remember what you have learned. Remember how it feels to belong, and share that feeling with everyone you meet." Ambassador Zenok stepped forward. "On behalf of all the ambassadors, I want to thank you. You have given us more than we can ever repay. You have shown us what it means to be truly alive." "That is the greatest gift of pack bonding," said Captain Chen. "It does not diminish when it is shared. It grows. The more love you give, the more love you have. Take that truth back to the stars." The next morning, the ambassadors boarded their shuttle. They looked back at Earth through the windows, watching as the beautiful blue planet grew smaller and smaller. Vrixthel felt a deep sadness, but also a deep hope. She was carrying something precious with her, something that would change the Federation forever, something that would transform every being it touched. She was carrying the gift of human pack bonding, and she would share it with the entire galaxy. The journey back to Federation space took several days. During that time, the 12 ambassadors talked constantly about their experiences on Earth. They shared stories, memories, and insights. They made plans for how they would introduce pack bonding to their own species. "My people are logical and cold," said Ambassador Krull. "They will resist this change, but I believe that once they experience connection, they will understand its value." "My people are warriors," said Ambassador Zenok. "They value strength and courage, but I have learned that true strength comes from love, not from force. I will teach them this." "My people are delicate and shy," said Ambassador Melira. "They fear contact with other species, but I have learned that connection is worth the risk. I will show them that vulnerability can be beautiful." Vrixthel listened to her fellow ambassadors and felt proud of them. They had all been transformed by their experience on Earth. They were no longer the same beings who had arrived at New Chicago full of doubt and resistance. When the shuttle finally docked at the Federation Central Station, the ambassadors were greeted by a large delegation of officials. The Federation Council was eager to hear about their mission. "Report," said the High Chancellor, a stern Veloxian with silver skin and no visible emotions. "What have you learned about the humans?" The ambassadors looked at each other. They knew that their report would be unlike anything the Council had ever heard. Vrixthel stepped forward. "We have learned that humans possess something more powerful than any weapon or technology," she said. "They have the ability to create bonds of love and belonging that transcend all barriers. They call it pack bonding." The High Chancellor frowned. "Pack bonding? What does this have to do with trade and diplomacy?" "Everything," said Ambassador Zenok. "Humans do not separate their personal relationships from their professional ones. They build trust and affection first, and then they do business. This approach has made them incredibly successful in everything they do." "But more than that," said Ambassador Melira, "pack bonding has transformed us. We went to Earth as diplomats, and we have returned as changed beings. We have experienced love, community, and belonging, and we believe the Federation needs to learn from this." The council members looked confused and skeptical. This was not the kind of report they had expected. They wanted data and analysis, not stories about feelings. But the ambassadors were prepared for this resistance. They had discussed how they would present their findings, and they knew that words alone would not be enough. "We request permission to demonstrate pack bonding," said Vrixthel. "We want to share what we have learned through experience, not just explanation." The High Chancellor considered this request. After a long pause, he nodded. "You have 30 days," he said. "Show us this pack bonding. If it is as powerful as you claim, we will consider implementing it throughout the Federation." The ambassadors smiled at each other. They had been given a chance, and they would not waste it. Over the following weeks, the 12 ambassadors worked tirelessly to introduce pack bonding to the Federation. They started small, with their own staff and colleagues. They organized meals together, encouraged personal conversations, and created opportunities for connection. At first, the response was mixed. Many Federation species were uncomfortable with the idea of emotional intimacy. They preferred the safety of formal protocols and transactional relationships. But slowly, things began to change. Vrixthal worked with the Korthan delegation, teaching her people about the power of small gestures. She showed them how to hold hands, how to give compliments, how to listen with empathy. At first, they were awkward and resistant, but gradually they began to soften. Ambassador Zenok worked with the Brellian military, demonstrating that caring for one's comrades was not a sign of weakness, but a source of strength. He shared stories from the storm on Earth, showing how working together for the good of others had made them all stronger. Ambassador Krull worked with the Thoraxian scientists, proving that emotional connection enhanced creativity and collaboration. He organized team-building activities and encouraged personal sharing during meetings. The results were remarkable. Teams that practiced pack bonding became more effective. Relationships between species improved. Conflicts that had seemed unsolvable began to find resolution through empathy and understanding. After 30 days, the ambassadors presented their findings to the council. The data was clear. Pack bonding worked. It improved productivity, reduced conflicts, and increased overall well-being across all participating groups. But the most powerful evidence came from the council members themselves. During the presentation, several of them began to cry. They had never experienced emotions so openly before, and the experience was overwhelming. "This is what humans have given us," said Vrixthal. "Not just trade agreements or technological exchange. They have given us a new way of being, a way that connects us to each other and to ourselves." The High Chancellor stood, his silver face showing the first traces of emotion anyone had ever seen. "I move that pack bonding be adopted as an official practice throughout the Federation," he said. "This is no longer just a human custom. It is a gift to all beings everywhere." The vote was unanimous. In the years that followed, pack bonding transformed the Galactic Federation. Species that had been enemies for generations learned to trust and love each other. Conflicts that had raged for centuries were resolved through connection and understanding. The Federation became not just a political alliance but a true community of beings. And at the center of it all were the 12 ambassadors who had gone to Earth and come back changed. They became known as the Bonded Ones, the pioneers who had brought human love to the stars. Vrixthal returned to Earth many times over the following decades. She kept her promise to Sophia, visiting the Rodriguez family whenever she could. She watched Sophia grow up, get married, and have children of her own. She watched Diego become a teacher who spread pack bonding to young humans and aliens alike. On her final visit to Earth, Vrixthal was very old by Korthan standards. Her blue skin had faded to pale gray and her movements were slow, but her hearts were still full of love. Sophia, now an elderly woman herself, sat beside Vrixthal in the garden of the family home. The oak tree that James had planted during that first community project had grown tall and strong, just as he had predicted. "You changed the galaxy," said Sophia, "all because you were willing to open your heart." Vrixthal smiled. "I did not change the galaxy," she said. "Love changed the galaxy, I just helped it along." They sat together in silence, watching the children play under the oak tree. Human children, Korthan children, Brellian children, Fiari children, all playing together, all connected, all family. This was the legacy of human pack bonding. This was what happened when beings chose to love each other despite their differences. This was the transformation that had started with 12 ambassadors and a 30-day visit, and had spread throughout the entire galaxy. As the sun set over New Chicago, Vrixthel felt a deep peace settle over her. She had lived a good life. She had loved and been loved. She had belonged. And that, she knew, was the greatest gift of all.